Hi everyone, welcome back for another episode of Looking Good with G. Today I'm going to show you how to bake a delicious upside down raspberry cake, perfect for an afternoon tea date or a dinner party with friends. To start, preheat your oven to 180 degrees and line a 20 centimeter cake tin with butter. Be generous because you really do not want your cake sticking to the tin. We're going to make a simple butter cake which is denser than a sponge, and it's a perfect one to keep in your baking repertoire as it's easy to layer and you can flavor it any way you wish. So now for the dry ingredients, we need 1.25 cups of plain flour. Spill it everywhere. And a wee bit more. And 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And give it a good sift. So now that that's been aerated, we can add 1/4 cup of polenta and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Always making a mess. Oh my God, I'm such So polenta might seem like a really funny ingredient to add to a cake, but it gives it a really lovely texture and a bit of a crunch. For the next part of the cake batter, we need 1/2 cup of butter and 3/4 cup of caster sugar and the zest of 1 lemon. Make sure you don't remove too much of the pith because the further you go, the bitterer it gets. Bitterer? Is bitterer a word? Bitterer? I'm going to beat this on a medium speed until it's pale, light and fluffy. So once we've done that, I'm going to reduce the speed of the mixer and I'm going to add the eggs one at a time. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Time for the dry ingredients. I'm going to add half of this mix into the bowl. Followed by 1/2 cup of milk. Once that's combined, add the rest of the mix and be careful not to overbeat. It looks great, so I'm going to head over to the stove for our next step. So now for the base of the cake, which ends up being the ooey gooey topping. So in this pan, I've got 1/3 cup of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to melt this on the stove until the sugar dissolves and it begins to bubble. And as the cake bakes, this sugar and butter mix with the raspberries will create like a caramelized, sweet and tangy syrup for the cake. So now that it's done, we can head back over to the bench and combine it with the cake mix and raspberries. Now that our sugar and butter mix is done, I'm going to pour that into the tin. Time to add the raspberries. Now I found that when I'm baking cakes, using tart fruits work really well because it sort of balances the sweetness of the sponge. And what you want is about 2 layers of raspberries because they do shrink up when they're cooking in the oven. So I'm using frozen fruit in this cake because it tends to hold its shape a lot better during the baking process. Fresh fruit turns into more of a jam-like consistency, but hey, use whatever you prefer. Hot tip though, frozen fruit is cheaper. It's time to add the cake batter to the tin. So just spread it over evenly. Now that that's done, I'm going to put it in the oven for about 50 minutes or until the skewer comes out clean. The cake's come out of the oven and it looks great, so I'm just going to use this knife and run it around the edges to make sure that the cake doesn't stick to the tin. Okay, I'm being pedantic now. Okay, now for the moment of truth. The first time I did this, half of it flipped out onto the stovetop. So I would advise that you use something that's flat, so a flat surface, a cake stand, a board, a flat plate. Makes it much easier to flip onto. I'm gonna put the cake in one hand and in one motion. Oh, I hope it doesn't stick. Give it a bit of a shimmy. It's loose, I can feel it. Woohoo! Check out that. So there you have it, my upside down raspberry cake. It is amazing served warm with some fresh cream and hot cuppa. So I reckon that's what I'm gonna do now.
Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya!